All right. All right. Boom, we're recording. So first I want to say thank you for joining me today. I think it's absolutely amazing that you made time for this. And I just want to once again just thank you for all that you do. I know you're in education and you're a teacher, so not only do you have our little youth minds to mold, but you are dealing with a whole new ball game, what entails teaching. So I just want to say thank you, because that is going to be a form of being on the front line. So thanks for that. Kind of want to give our listeners a little introduction about yourself, who you are, kind of what you do, if you want to elaborate more on that. And
sure.
We can start going.
Yeah. Hey, so first of all, thanks for having me. This is great because I don't know the last time I saw your face in person, even though we're Zooming from hundreds of miles away. So this is just fun for me to even be here, to get to sit here and talk to you. And first of all, I want to say I'm so proud of what you're doing. This is awesome for you to take this leap and to take this step out on faith and start something that you've had this interest in and felt called to do. I know I've already learned so much from listening to your last couple episodes. So you have a huge fan in me. Keep going. I support you. So this is just an honor for me to even have the opportunity to be here with you today. But yes, so I'm Lacey, and actually I know Sharde. We were college friends and roommates for a short time. And I mean, this was like back when we were young and both of our knees worked properly. This is a long time ago.
When we had Megan Thee Stallion knees. And,
yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
Things were a lot better. Yeah.
When I could get out of bed without everything cracking and like banging, for sure. But yeah. So we've known each other for a really long time, but have always kind of lived on opposite ends of the country. So it's been hard for us to kind of stay on top of what each other's doing. But yeah, so I live currently in Alabama, which is
a major surprise. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. I was really confused.
Yeah, so was I, actually. Sometimes I still am. So I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, not too far from Cleveland, which is where you're from, and had no intentions of leaving Pittsburgh. Like, you know me, I am like Pittsburgh through and through. And through opportunities, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and so through career opportunities, I've had a chance to move quite a bit. I've lived in North Carolina, taught in West Virginia. And so after I got married, we ended up here in Alabama, and I was kicking and screaming because when you're from the north and you hear anything below like Cincinnati, really, you automatically have stereotypes and connotations of how things are here in the South. And there's still a lot of those stereotypes and connotations, but as we see on the news every single day, that seems to be happening in a whole lot more places than just Alabama, Mississippi, and those kinds of places. So
absolutely. You would actually think it would happen more there, but it's crazy because more of the metro cities have all of the other stuff going on.
It's crazy. So like prime example, we went home last summer for it's a little family reunion, and we had our daughter last year, and so we went home to kind of introduce her to the family. And we rented out, like one of those, I don't know, like little community centers or whatever they have for the little towns or whatever. And so some old guys were sitting there hanging out, the same old guys that are always hanging out, And the first thing they said to my husband when they asked us about Alabama, meanwhile, I'm standing right there. Yeah. They asked him, "Oh, do you have a problem with N-words running around?" Like just straight off, like, "Hey, how you doing? You got a problem with N-words?" What? I had to go all the way back to Pennsylvania for that mess. But like here in Alabama, especially working in the school system, and we work, I live right outside of Huntsville. We have NASA here. I mean, like my students' parents are rocket scientists. Yeah. And I've seen more diversity here in North Alabama than I ever did.
It's actually surprising.
Crazy.
Even from when we lived in Louisville, and we spent a short time in Charlotte, and that's when we solidified that, okay, this is home.
Yeah.
You would think the South would be less of that, but it was
Yeah,
actually like more diverse, more where I feel, especially for African Americans, to just thrive more, job opportunities, better placement, career
for
wise. And I'm
sure.
like, I think it's time to navigate back home. Like,
For
let's all
sure.
go back down south. But that
Yeah.
brings me to another thing. I was just telling my husband, I felt like racial injustice in COVID brought us closer together. And it's so weird because we always talk, we always make jokes. We
Yeah.
do our annual birthday,
Yeah.
uh, our
Yeah.
annual birthday status. But it was your outcry that really resonated with me. And like I said, I think I told Lance, I was like, I'm like, Lacey? Like, is this her?
Yeah.
Because I was just like, oh, let me get my stuff together. Because I'm like, because
Yeah.
Lacey out here, like, posting. And I
Yeah.
know you have a lot of individuals who, are of, different races that you are friends with and you're amongst with and everything like that. I was like, and if she can be this vocal, I was like, I need to, step my game up completely. And I think it was the time we had to get somebody together on your wall. And I was just like, me and Lacey needs to be a lot closer. She's amazing.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
I was
Well,
like,
thanks for saying that.
I just love that spirit. So what kind of made you start the posting, the being informant, and because it's a little rocky, sometimes you don't want to test those relationships with people that you're really close to and things like that. So what kind of gave you the courage and just the know how
Yeah.
to do
Well, I guess before I answer that, I want to touch on something you just said, because
that?
if
Yeah.
you have people in your life who you feel you can't approach with these types of conversations and situations,
Yeah.
maybe they're not the people for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've known me for a long time. I've never been one to hold back what I
No.
felt about really anything. But I
Absolutely.
think more importantly for me, as a biracial female, um, we fit in a very strange category,
Absolutely.
right? So typically, and this has been my experience, obviously I can't speak for all, biracial people, but in my experience, a lot of times I'm not considered Black enough for the Black community, and I'm not white. So I don't fit in solely to that community either. So, growing up, that was like a very weird situation to navigate. It's like,
Hmm.
where do I fit in that regard? And so it's important for me, for the white people in my life, to know that I'm not stagnant on these issues. Yes, I don't look like a typical African American. I don't look like my dad,
Hmm.
but these are issues that are still important to me because they directly involve me. They directly involve my brothers and my dad and my uncles and a lot of relatives. I might not have experienced a lot of these things personally, but
Hmm.
this is also my battle. It should be all of our battle, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
unfortunately, that's just not the realism that we have in this society. But so for me, it really wasn't a question about, I got to dig up the courage to say something. It was like, no, I need people to get in line with where my head's at. And I need to know real quick who's walking that line with me. Because if you're not walking that line with me, you got to go ahead and go somewhere, because, this is change. This is a big change that's happening. I
Yeah.
feel like in our world, we see these things like every few years. Back in 2017, when in Minneapolis, also Solano Castillo, when he was murdered, I feel like there was a big uprising then, and with Trayvon Martin, there was a big uprising then. Antoine Rose in Pittsburgh, but they faded, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't remember a time that it's been this ongoing. And
Hmm.
I don't know if maybe COVID had something to do with it. Maybe people were already like in a mood to fight and in a mood to speak out about things. And maybe
Absolutely.
that's the blessing in disguise about this. I don't know.
Hmm.
But I felt, it's really important. And then also too, like as an educator, it's literally my job to teach people, right? So that's just something that's always come naturally to me, is to try to educate people. But part of being an educator is to make sure that you are in a position to learn from others as well. So I didn't ever go into a situation posting everything, and making sure that everybody hears me and that everything I'm posting is right. Like, I've spent my time too digging into materials, digging into books, doing webinars, and doing the work so that I can come correct and try to, present what I can to people. Now, what they do with that information is up to them,
Absolutely.
but my heart's in the right place knowing that I'm on the right side of history.
No. And like I said, I just think it's amazing. And then just following your example caused me to look up more information, become more informed on the situation, and just not follow trends of black squares and
Right.
and understand
Right.
the meaning behind that. And it caused me to have to really unfollow quite, a lot of people. It was just like,
Absolutely.
you know what? I don't have time. So I'm just going to unfollow you and we're going to take it from there.
And I think the important thing too to know is, to pick your battles. You can only say what you can say, and you pretty much know who's going to be set in their ways, and who are the people that are truly open and willing to learn and willing to educate themselves on any of these issues. Unless you're just somebody who just really likes to argue. It just seems like a little bit like you could be using your time more wisely to educate yourselves or to have valuable conversations from people you're going to get something back from.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And that brings us to kind of what our topic is for today. The reason I wanted to have you on so much is because I feel personally you have an amazing story. And that is something that I feel as a community, we just do not talk about enough. And that is especially minority women when it comes to healthcare. And
yeah.
I don't know if you have been following like the news recently and things like that, but I feel like we have lost so many young women to lack of healthcare or lack of I feel like physicians and hospitals really going above and beyond to cater to us. Like I feel like we should be catered to when certain things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary for me. I feel like, why is this not an outcry? Why is this not anything that we're protesting and marching about and things like that? Because us as women, we are essentially the backbone to the majority of things.
And but we're also lowest on the totem pole in any order
there
of
you
any
go.
topic.
There you go. And naturally, we are the giver of life. Nobody else can do that. So why is this an issue? And if you want to briefly share a little bit of your experience, what happened to you during childbirth, that would be absolutely great. And then after you share your opinions on whether you feel like you were heard during that situation.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, my husband and I had our daughter last year, Ruby.
She's a kitty.
I'm a little biased, but she's pretty cute. She's wild. She got a little attitude. I don't know who she gets it from, but somewhere. But yeah, so, we were planning and we didn't really have a lot of issues as far as getting pregnant or anything like that. And honestly, in terms of being our pregnancy was uneventful. It was a normal pregnancy. We, I had some morning sickness and things like that, but like, I felt like my experience from obviously, I'm an educator, so I was reading all the articles and reading books and doing the apps and everything I could do. I pretty much fell right in line with everything that was supposed to be happening. And so my issues and things didn't really start until pretty late in my third trimester. So right around 33 weeks is when I started to experience swelling in my feet, in my hands. So that was the point when like I couldn't wear my wedding ring anymore. But again, I've read all the books. I've read all the articles.
That was supposed to be normal.
What did they say? You're going to swell. And that's normal, right? Your body is producing basically double the blood volume. It's dealing with double the amount of fluid in your body. So that's normal. And what they don't tell you in the articles and in the books and in the apps is that generally when you are swollen, right? So like if you injure your ankle and it's swollen, they tell you to elevate it, right? Mm-hmm. So what they don't tell you is when you get home and you put your feet up and you rest, the swelling is supposed to go away. Well, I didn't do this, right? I'm a first-time pregnancy, first-time mom. I don't know these things. I just know what my doctors say. I know what the articles say. And so anyway, it was I was so swollen. Like, it was comical how swollen I was.
Wow.
Like, my shoes were like busting over this. It was ridiculous. I would send pictures every day to my husband and be like, look at this. It is so insane. I couldn't wear any shoes. I was wearing flip-flops. It was February and March, and I know it's hot in Alabama, but it was like wintertime in Alabama.
Yeah.
So it's cold. So I brought that up to my my OB, and so at that point I was on 1 week appointments because we were already past that time. And she kind of felt around, checked it out, said, yeah, you're normal, you're good. Cool. That's what I thought, because that's what my articles told me, right? So I guess, let me think, around 35 weeks, I started getting this just like random cough. Again, I work in the school system, so I get colds and coughs and viruses like a million times. It's nothing that phases me. And we had just replaced the floors in our house. We had like a flood that happened. And so we had been cleaning this whole weekend. There was dust everywhere. So I honestly didn't think anything of it. This was maybe like on Monday that I started this cough. I'm still swollen. So by Thursday of that week, the cough was so bad that like I couldn't, when I was laying down to sleep or anything more than like sitting up in a chair, I was coughing like crazy, like catching my breath coughing. And so at that point, I was kind of like, I just don't feel like this is right? So I'm walking up steps, and granted, I'm out of breath, but I'm like, I feel like I've just run 5 miles. Like, I don't feel like I'm, walking up the stairs out of breath. But again, pregnant, you got a baby in there, they're squishing your lungs, you're out of breath, that's normal.
All right.
So tell me when, getting up from the couch and walking to the sink and you feel like you're going to fall out because you can't breathe is normal. I don't, we'll get back to that. Anyway, so we make it towards the end of that week, and I finally got bad enough to the point where I was really struggling to breathe. And this was like literally walking across the living room, had to, hold on to something. I'm struggling. And so, ironically, that day at work, my team was throwing me a baby shower, and I had to wear sunglasses in the baby shower because all of a sudden I got this raging migraine. Could not see out of my eyes. All the lights in the building I was seeing like sparkles and all kinds of crazy stuff. So when I headed home that afternoon, I caught my husband. He was headed to work for night shift. And I said, I don't, this is the headache, all these things are happening one after the other. I think we need to go ahead and go to the hospital. So we went, and the first thing they asked me, what's kind of your symptoms? And I was like, well, I have this crazy headache, which I knew typically when you have headaches like that and you're pregnant, as late term as I was, that typically is a sign that something's wrong with your blood pressure. So they went ahead and took my blood pressure, and it was through the roof, 160 over 110, through the roof.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I told them I can't breathe. I'm having a problem breathing. Okay, we'll check you out. We sat there for close to 2 hours in the ER, not in a room, like in the waiting room. They triage you, so they take your blood pressure, they take your temp and all those general things. And then we sat for 2 hours. And so, of course, in my mind, everything is going wrong, because now all I'm thinking of, I'm going to have a stroke. I'm going to die in this waiting room. Like, this is crazy. I'm pregnant. Like, why is nobody, I see people that are walking into the ER on their own 2 feet who look, of course, you can't, gauge by how people look, but they didn't look sick to me, but I knew how I felt and they were going in and going past. So 2 hours goes by. We finally get back to the room in the ER. And they start running all these tests. They ask me again, what's wrong? How do you feel? I cannot breathe. I'm telling you, I cannot breathe. Well, I'm pregnant, so I have to lay down for all of the tests that they're doing. And I had already mentioned before, like when I laid down, I felt like I was drowning. Absolutely felt like I'm going to die right here and there. So they hook me up to the monitors, and they tell me, well, your oxygen's 100%, so you're fine. I said, okay, but I don't think you understand. I cannot breathe. Well, we'll do some other tests. We'll see. So they decided to go ahead and admit me overnight. They put me on some blood pressure medication to get my blood pressure down, and just to monitor. During this time too, the baby, all the stats for her were pretty good. So they weren't concerned for her at that time. So I'm on all these medications all night. Next morning, my blood pressure has come down, but it's still really high. Again, I had to sleep in my hospital bed at an incline because I could not lay down. So I was basically sleeping, sitting up. They continue to tell me, your oxygen's 100%, you're good. Your oxygen's 100%, you're good. I continue telling them, I cannot breathe.
Wow.
I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe.
I mean,
and
yeah.
at one point I told the nurse, I feel like I'm drowning. So the next morning, this was a Friday the 15th, because that's the day Ruby ended up being born. Flash to the end of the story. The OB on call finally comes in and he listens to my lungs. And as soon as he listened to my lungs, his face dropped. It freaked me out. I was like, would you like to use your words? Because what is that? What does the facial expression mean? He said, I think we need to go ahead and do a chest x-ray. That was like the one test out of the however many I had the night before. So we go and do the chest x-ray. You know, the results come back, I don't know, however long. And he comes in and tells me, we are going to have to deliver this baby today. Wait, what? We're like 3.5 weeks from our due date. So we pretty much have everything done, but there's like, being a first-time parent, there's, you know, we got checklists and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so what do you mean today? Like, we're here. What do you mean today? He's like, your lungs are filled with fluid. You're drowning. He tells me, you're drowning. Then all I can think of is I have been saying to them, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I'm drowning. But what did they tell me? Your oxygen's 100%. And so not only does he tell me that we're having the baby today, he tells me that I will be having an emergency C-section within 30 minutes from the point that he's telling me this information.
Wow.
So here we are. We knew something was wrong. We weren't sure how serious it was, but we felt like we weren't being taken serious enough. And so we go from, yeah, girl, you're good. It's probably just, you know, some blood pressure stuff, to no, like, we need to get this baby out of you in 30 minutes. We're concerned that neither of you are going to make it. What? Like, where was the in-between, right?
Oh, so yeah, it's ridiculous.
Dan and I, at this point, we're thinking back, you know, we did the parenting class that the hospital offered. And one of the things they say is, you know, most most women who have a baby deliver naturally. There's a 30% I think the national norm for C-sections is about 33%ish, which is insanely high. 1 in 3 women are going to have a C-section. That's a cause of many, many, many issues that we'll talk about. And then they said something like 4% of women have an emergency C-section. We stopped listening after natural birth, right? So we didn't even pay attention to the part of the class where they're talking to you about what happens.
Yeah.
So the pulmonologist, the lung doctor, comes in right after my OB tells me we're going to have this baby right this second, and tells me that essentially they're going to put me to sleep for this C-section, which is even more rare than the emergency C-section, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And the reason that they were going to do that is because when they give you a C-section, they give you an epidural. So you're basically numb from your chest down.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It feels like something's sitting on your chest. Your chest is tight just from how the medicine numbs you. And it can feel like it's difficult to breathe. And they were afraid that I was going to essentially pass out or hyperventilate because I already couldn't breathe, and I couldn't breathe laying down. I was going to have to be laid down, arms strapped, that kind of thing. So they intubated me. They put me to sleep. When you have a C-section under general anesthesia, which means you're asleep, your support person is not allowed in the OR. So Dan was not allowed to come in with me. So he basically had to sit outside the OR doors after we just found out all this was happening, and just wait. And so, you know, that was another thing, kind of like in the healing process of all this, you know, he's had healing to do too, because we both had an idea of how this birth was going to go. You know, he had the plans that he wanted to do and things he wanted to see and experience. We had those things together. I had kind of my vision for it, and it didn't happen that way for us. Yeah. What I did not know is that I was going to be intubated for the next 18 hours. So I when I woke up, or I guess I was awake at some point, but when I remember waking up, there was a clock directly in front of me, and it said 9:20 something, I remember. Well, my surgery was at 5:30 in the afternoon. The clock said 9:20, and I looked out the window, and it was broad daylight outside. And I could not figure out how, I had just had surgery 4 hours ago. I must have been asleep for the last 4 hours. How is it light outside? I couldn't piece that together. And I had a tube in my throat, so I couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't ask questions. And there were so many people around me, and Dan wasn't there. He was with the baby at the time, and I lost it. I lost it. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea what was going on. I suddenly became very aware of the tube in my throat. I was choking. I mean, it was horrifying. And I really, honest to God, thought, I'm going to die. Like, I'm not going to meet my daughter. I'm going to die right here and there. And it was another, let me think, 3.5 hours before they removed that tube from my throat. And I was awake the entire time. So it was just absolutely traumatic. That's the only word that I can really think to sum it up for me. I know you told me to tell a brief story, and I'm like, but this story, it's just not. I mean, so
no, I love it. Like, I love the
Yeah.
transparency, and it's crazy because this is something women, it is very emotional. It's very hard to talk about. So a lot of times we don't share these in-depth stories. Like,
absolutely,
you might tell an individual, okay, yeah, I had a difficult pregnancy, or I had a difficult delivery, but to really share what happened and listening to you, it is absolutely amazing, because the similarities that I feel like I have with you in general about my own story. For a little transparency, I have lost 4 children. I have lost 4. I have had 4 miscarriages, and the one where I carried the longest, which was KJ, and I was 7 months. I sat in the ER for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that's why I just lost my mind when you said that. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I can just remember today constantly going up to the window, explaining to them I don't feel right, explaining to them that I am cramping, and to sit in a hard hospital ER chair and lose my child would still be one of the hardest things that I, ever experienced, because it's like, how can you not get me back there or care? And it was crazy because they weren't even busy.
Yeah. And it's hard because, obviously you don't, as just a regular person who doesn't work in the healthcare system, I don't understand the other side. You really only know how you feel and what you're experiencing. However,
I don't want to know.
However,
to be truthful,
like, it's not it's their job to listen to you.
Absolutely.
And so, first of all, I'm so sorry, that you have gone through that. I hate that we're bonded in this insane experience of something that's supposed to be the most natural thing a woman can do, yet it's the most unnatural process for any woman to go through. Absolutely.
It's no joke. It's
no joke. So anyway, so all that happened. I ended up staying in ICU for 3 more days while they drained over 30 pounds of fluid out of my body.
Wow.
Hence all the swelling that was so normal, right? Another red flag that nobody noticed. Throughout my pregnancy, I had gained 11 pounds. Between week 33 and 37, which is right when I delivered, I gained 30. Right around 30, like 27 pounds.
Wow.
So,
and doctor,
they weigh you every time you're there, right?
So your doctor was like, "Oh, this is normal."
No one said this is normal to me. And I'm looking at the scale like, what the crap happened? Like, this was not like this last week when I was here.
Yeah.
So there were red flags that were missed.
Wow.
So
that's insane.
Crazy enough. So while I'm there, one of the things that happened is a cardiologist came to test my heart function. And when she came, I was still very, very medicated. Like on the good stuff, like feeling good. I was eating all the peach yogurt they were giving me, like I was killing it.
Yeah.
And I remember her, she may have said more than this, but I'm pretty sure I was lucid enough to remember the full conversation. Okay. She came in, older lady, she said to me, we're going to test your heart function after everything that happened, because sometimes what you went through is a sign of heart failure. If you have it, you can't ever have children again. If you can, you're good. Or if you don't have it, you're good to go. I'll come back and let you know what the results are. And then she walked out of the room.
Oh, bedside manner is on.
Bedside manner. So you're telling me after I just had this horrible traumatic birth, my first child, that now something might be wrong with me where I can't have any kids ever again. Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. So
I tell you, I'm assuming she was a white older lady.
How could you guess? Oh my gosh.
Because probably it was the same white older lady who sat there when I was bawling my eyes out about my miscarriage, telling me that you're young. You'll have more. People like you have more. People, girls your age, have kids all the time.
Yeah, which is such a horrifying statement to make to someone. I mean, like, let's get off on a tangent. Anyone who's listening to this, please, please, please do not think for 1 second that you have the right in whatever, like, heartfelt way, manner, shape, or form you think, you do not have the right to ask a woman about her plans to have children. You have no idea what those people have gone through and have experienced, and how gut-wrenching it is.
Absolutely.
For someone to have to sit there and smile and say something like, oh, we'll see, or, you know, when God's timing is right, knowing full well that that's not what's really happening. You don't understand the pieces that you leave behind when you meaningfully ask a woman something like that. It's awful.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. I got you.
Yeah. So the doc comes back. I don't even know, maybe a day late. I don't know when she came back.
A day late?
It could have been. Honestly, I'm not sure. I told you I was on the good stuff. Okay. But I do remember her coming back and she says, hey, you're good. You don't have what we thought you might have. And I said, okay, great. So then I just spent the rest of the time really recovering. I was obviously recovering from the C-section. I was still having a lot of breathing troubles, because when you have any type of like fluid or whatever in your lungs, it really damages your lungs. Have you ever like been in a pool and swallowed water?
Absolutely.
You know how it burns for like a hot minute after? Mm-hmm. Okay, so imagine like 30 pounds of that. Ooh, it felt like I've never smoked, but I could attest, like it was burning as if maybe I had been a smoker or something. I don't know. Okay. So yeah, I spent the time recovering from my C-section, trying to figure out how to be a new mom and all the things that happened there. And I ended up going home 5.5 days later from the time that I was admitted.
Okay, you had good insurance. They kept you from time.
Luckily, I have good insurance. But I also had, like, because I had the major issues, it was kind of classified as something else. But yes, they treat us educators well here in Alabama. So thank goodness for that. When I got home, I was not feeling better. But having just gone through all of this, I didn't know how I was supposed to feel. I didn't know what my body was supposed to be feeling like or how I should be reacting to things. I do know that from the first night on, I felt like I could not breathe. And so probably by day 4 of being home, I started having nightmares in my sleep about drowning. And I would wake up. I was sleeping again with my pillows propped up, because when I would lay flat, I started to feel like my chest was really heavy again. And the most vivid nightmares you can imagine, where I literally was looking up, I could see the surface and all the water was around me, and I could not get to the top. And then I would wake up like in a cold sweat, gasping, so terrified. And then I'm looking at my baby who's sleeping in the crib next to me, and looking at my husband who's sleeping so peacefully next to me. And I would just sit there and cry and just sob, because I just thought I was going to die. I just had these feelings and these premonitions, like my body is giving out on me. I'm going to die. But here's another thing, you know, being a new mom, the attention is not on you. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about how a lot of women, especially pregnant women or newly postpartum women, experience a lot of things, and they don't speak up for themselves because they have this guilt of taking the attention away from the baby. And women already put themselves last in a lot of things, right? As women, we find ourselves in the caretaker role a lot. And so that a lot of times that means that we put our needs and our care, our health, and our well-being dead last. And unfortunately, a lot of women end up losing their lives over that because they don't feel, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but they feel guilty about needing to speak up for themselves in that way. And so I didn't say anything. And it was probably about 2.5 weeks that went by. And I started coughing. And when I started coughing, I panicked. I said, this is happening again. Like, this is exactly how it happened. This is happening again. And I told Dan, I said, we need to go right now. So we went back to the hospital, and ironically enough, I was back in the ER within 15 minutes. They took me back within 15 minutes. And I was straight back up to labor and delivery floor because I was less than 3 weeks postpartum. So maybe that was, they asked you that on the form that I filled out. So I don't know. I guess that had something to do with it. And they repeated the heart scan that I had a couple weeks ago that the old white lady told me I was good. So they started me on this medicine that drains all this fluid again out of your body. This time they drained about 23 more pounds of fluid out of my body. Hence the cough, hence why I couldn't breathe. And the next morning, a different cardiologist came to my room and said, hey, so we ran this scan. And I was like, that name sounds familiar. Like, the name of the test sounds familiar. He's like, yeah, you actually had this scan 3 weeks ago when you were here. And I said, oh, okay. And he sat down and he looked very, granted, this is the first time I ever met him, but he looked very sad. I remember that about him. He looked really sad. And I thought to myself, like, this is not going to be good. Dan wasn't there at the time. He was home with the baby. And he tells me that, look, you know, all these issues that you've been having, you have a condition called peripartum cardiomyopathy. And I'm like, all right, to get to like the English that I can understand. And it's basically a rare form of heart failure that is brought on solely by pregnancy. It's one of these insane, weird things that your body does in response to all of the things, all of the natural, normal things that are happening when you're pregnant and carrying a child. And so he tells me at that time that my heart function was about 35%. And that it was very strongly recommended that I not have kids again.
So to hit it in retrospect for our listener, what is a normal?
Yeah. So a normal heart function is about anywhere between like 55% and up. And so what that basically means, it's the amount of blood your heart can take in and then pumps back out is that percentage. So the first thing I asked him is, well, wait a minute, I just had this test, right? Like, what? I just had this test. She told me I was good. In 3 weeks, What changed in 3 weeks? And I asked him, well, what was my percentage 3 weeks ago? And he said it was 50%. So my heart function, although it was at the lower end of normal, it was declined at that point. It was starting to drop at that point. And so I was in heart failure. That's what caused all this to begin with. But it was not caught for 3 more weeks. And so that was just obviously a huge blow to me. And I felt like, you know, going back to all this again, I felt like I wasn't listened to the first time. You know, I'm telling people I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I'm going through this. No one's listening to me. But the baby's fine. Okay, great. But I'm not okay, right?
Right.
This doctor, oh, yeah, you're good. But my heart was already in a declining function, like a normal 30, I don't know how old I was last year, 30-some-year-old first-time pregnant mom typically wouldn't have a heart function of 50% if there wasn't something, right? And so now I'm just in this place, like, with so many questions and so many, you know, I had my moment of like self-pity and
of course,
why me type thing. And then very quickly I turned to becoming an advocate for myself, because I just was not in a place where I was willing to accept the fact that I'm not going to have children and this is the news I'm getting 3 weeks after I've just had my first child.
Right.
And so I have spent the last year of my life, year and a half almost, diving into as much as I can immerse myself in to be able to speak for myself, to educate myself in maternal health issues, and then be able to educate others too. Because, I mean, my condition, for example, my mom was an OR nurse in the cardiac unit for over 20 years.
Wow.
And she's never heard of the condition that I have.
Crazy.
You know, so if our healthcare professionals don't know it and don't understand it, like the one who misdiagnosed me the first time, how can we expect normal population, especially mothers and especially first-time mothers who don't know what questions to ask, how can we expect them to be educated in that?
No, you're absolutely right. And I am happy that you are just here and you're able to talk to me right now. I mean, talk about a dramatic experience.
Yeah. You said short, but there's no short really to this story.
No. It doesn't need to be short, because I think that shows people how, to me, it shows that just the lack of attention to detail from our healthcare workers. I don't know how many times I have waited in the waiting room longer than my actual appointment.
Yeah, for sure.
Would have been. I recall one time being pregnant, and I'm a little heavier. So I remember my doctor, when they put the, thing to hear the heartbeat or whatever like that, she was just like, oh, okay, yeah. I don't, she was like, well, I don't hear the heartbeat. She was like, but you're fine. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I just remember how I felt, like being scared, feeling alone. And you can have the guy there, her husband there, but they don't know anything.
They're not the ones feeling it and experiencing it.
They don't know anything. And it's really, really hard, because I just feel like, one, there's a lot of lack of representation, there too. I think my whole time, my most dramatic experience, I didn't run across one person, any type of minority, just people who were like, oh, you're okay. Oh, you're this. Oh, you're supposed to feel like this, or, no. And then when you do talk, when you do speak out, you become an aggravating patient or a complaining patient or anything like that. But how can someone be complaining if they feel like their life
is in danger?
Yeah.
And I love that you said that too about representation. I just read a great article the other day about a woman who had to have, a Black woman that had to have brain surgery. She had I obviously don't know the name of it, but basically she had these tumors that grew and grew back and grew back and grew back. And she talked about her hair, and she talked about how she was, in planning for a brain surgery, her major concern was that she had like really big curly hair, was that her hair was going to be bothersome to the doctors. And so she spent hours braiding and trying to keep it as minimal as possible so that she didn't have to be a burden to these doctors, right? And so she talked about, literally, like, in her brain surgery prep, all she could think about, all she was concerned about is, how is my hair going to be perceived? Are they going to be frustrated? Are they going to have to do this? Are they have to do that? And she said when she woke up from surgery, she noticed that her braids were redone differently than the way she had done them. And she said, I thought maybe one of the nurses did it or something like that. And it turns out that her brain surgeon was an African-American with 3 daughters. And he braided it himself. Like, the brain surgeon took the time to braid this woman's hair. And she said she felt just such a sense of relief and felt such a sense of just acceptance and love in that moment, that someone that, is on this pedestal, this brain surgeon who looked like her, took the time, because he understands the importance of hair to an African-American woman. And that's what representation in the healthcare field is. And unfortunately, and you touched on this too, you talked about, asking questions you're then deemed aggravating or abrasive or aggressive or whatever it is. Unfortunately, for minority women, specifically Black women, they already carry that stereotype of being aggressive and of having an attitude. And
Right.
so when they do speak out, I mean, there are immense biases, first of all, for Black women all over the world, but especially in the healthcare industry.
Right.
Black women die at a rate of 4 times white women in America. In America, the most civilized, the most, whatever first world country you want to talk about, at a rate of 4 times. And these biases are ingrained into the medical industry. Back in slavery days, the father of modern obstetrics and gynecology used to practice his operations on slave women unanesthetized, because there was a myth that African Americans didn't have a pain, they felt no pain, and they had really high
a pain
tolerance.
sensor.
And so, I mean, these are things that are still ingrained into the healthcare system today. And Black women are dying at an alarming rate, and nobody's blinking an eye except for the families of these women.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
I mean, it's insane.
One thing that stuck out to me is, if you were a white woman, when the test came back at 50%,
right,
made the doctor say, "Oh, you're okay," instead of coming to you and saying, "You're at 50% and this is not normal. So these are going to be the next steps we're going to take to try to correct this. You let me go home." I could have went home and I could have died.
I could have died. I would have died if it had been if it was another 2 to 3 days, I would have been dead.
And I mean,
if I had not said anything.
I mean, to me, and it's crazy because even in that most vulnerable state, you still have to be your own activist, your own. You have to save your own life.
And I'm not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying it's just crazy to me.
I'm not denying, as a biracial person who looks ambiguous, I could pass for Greek, I could pass for Italian, I could pass for, depends on, how bright the sun is shining and what the tan looks like. But I have privileges that African American women do not have.
Absolutely.
I'm very well convinced that they may have never even gotten that scan in the first place and would have been dead before they even knew it hit them.
What are you talking about?
I'm 100% convinced by that. I mean, that's the world that we live in, and it's horrifying, absolutely horrifying. I'm in a support group on social media with for women that have the condition that I have, PPCM, and there's about, I don't know, 3,000 women from all over the world. We have women,
and that's not a lot.
Middle East,
yeah.
No, there's not.
That's not
Australia, Middle East, Canada, South America, lots from America, and within the last year. No, not even. Probably since the fall, maybe October-ish, we've lost quite a few women in our group who've passed from this condition. But 4 of them alone have been African American women.
Wow.
And that's just the ones that we know about, who just happen to be in this social media group. Yeah.
It's
so
crazy. And that's why I just want to keep encouraging individuals. I know that healthcare is not easy. I know that it is something that a lot of times, if you're not that, doctor or high-end nurse, it is overlooked, and the long hours and probably not adequate pay, and, things like that. You say the same for teaching, but it is so important to keep that representation in healthcare. We need it now more than ever. I was just reading an article where they were saying that they're scared because of the COVID-19, how a lot of the community hospitals are closing. So, the ones that are in the inner city, and they only cater to the low income, with that being most likely African American individuals, and how now these women who would go there for their prenatal care and things like that are not able to receive those things because the hospital is not going to deal with these, if you don't have insurance, they kick you in, and they kick you out.
We call those medical deserts, because they're so far and few between, or there is a low income hospital available, but it's 80 miles away, 2-hour drive. I mean, that happens a lot. It's really unfortunate. And I mean, I can't I can't say enough. Now, granted, I could never be a healthcare professional. My mom, I told you, was a nurse for
Yeah,
30 some years
I
in
couldn't
like
do it
in the
either.
trenches. And
Yeah.
she would come home, you have dinner conversations with your family. Like, how was your day? And she's like, I was elbow deep in a man's like abdomen today. I'm like, what are we talking? But I have the utmost respect for our healthcare professionals, our nurses, our doctors,
Absolutely,
nurse practitioners, all of them, the custodians and the janitors that are in I absolutely do.
Absolutely.
But what I've learned from this situation is that just like us,
They
doctors are humans.
Yeah.
And they get tired. And they've had just a little bit more schooling than we have.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know everything there is to know about everything that there is to know about everything.
Yes.
And the worst thing that you can do as a patient is to put 100% trust in someone without asking questions, without being informed. Absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't go to the polls to vote without trying to spend time to learn about the candidates that you're wanting to vote, right? You're not just going to go in there blind and cross your fingers and hope for the best. So why would you do that with your life and your well-being and your health and your safety? And that's a hard thing to say, especially to women of color and the African-American community, because there is that stigma of being aggressive and of having an attitude. And if that's the case, ask for a second opinion. Ask for a new doctor if that's something that you can do.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I do want to let listeners know. If you're listening, do not be afraid. You're not going to offend them. If anything, they are going to be happy that you are gone off of their caseload. If you get a vibe, if you get a feeling, if you just feel like this person is just rushing you, get up, walk out. And if you are able to, set up an appointment with somebody else. That's just not the person for you. You have to have a trusting rapport and just a sense of, I might be okay, you know, with this individual.
Yeah.
You know,
go ahead.
No, you can go.
Well, I was going to say, and another thing a lot of people don't know, as a patient, you have the right to refuse any test, any service. You have the right to be totally informed about what they're going to do to your body. So please make sure that you are speaking up, that you're asking questions. If you don't feel comfortable with something, you do not have to have that service done. And that's something that people don't understand. They think, the doctors are the end all be all, but ultimately it's you or who decided. You can hire and fire the doctor however you want. If you're in labor, you can fire your doctor right then and there and ask for a hospitalist to come in if you don't feel comfortable with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Those are just things that we don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of us have been conditioned to just kind of shut up and let them do their job. Like, we can let them do their job, they know what they're doing, and all this other stuff. But if I don't like the way you're doing it, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay.
Absolutely.
And it's okay.
My dog just walked in.
He's okay. I mean, no, she's okay. She's perfectly fine.
But I mean, I really love the cardiologist that I have. The cardiologist that I have now is the one who ended up diagnosing me. And I really feel a partnership in working with him, because every change that's made, every test that's ordered is a discussion between both of us. How am I feeling? What are all of my options? I'm going to choose this option because this is how I feel right now. It's not just, this is what you're doing, this is what you're getting. And that's how it should be. I know that's so rare. I mean, that is so rare. And I'm very fortunate to have I believe one of the best cardiologists in the state of Alabama. I'm biased, but just based on the care I'm getting, I would really strongly urge everybody who's in some type of situation where you're having to advocate for yourself or for others, just to make sure that you feel comfortable with that person. I mean, you're right. Sometimes it really just is a vibe.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can sense those feelings or aggressions or microaggressions that are coming out of a person. And that's, you can't deny those things.
No, absolutely. And that is going to be, I know one thing definitely for me, when I was living in Kentucky, I had a wonderful doctor. It was an infertility doctor, and me and him we were like connected. Like, I have never spent that much time in a doctor's office. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I had to ask him, like, okay, well, I'm ready to go now. Like, I'm done talking. And he was like, okay, well, we could try it. And I'm so upset that I moved. I do know when I go on that journey again to try to, become a mother, I will go through 1,000 doctors to find the right
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
To find the right one. And that's why it's really important. And as far as African Americans, we put a lot of stock into other things. And the main thing that we need to have is good insurance. That is going to take you a lot farther than any bag, any purse, any car, anything, because
Right.
that alone is a stigma. Oh, she's Black, she doesn't have insurance, or we're going to just, before you even, check me. It was so funny because I was actually in the room when my sister was getting a cesarean, and this was my sister's like fourth cesarean, so she had a lot of scar tissue.
How did it go? Because I don't remember mine at all.
I passed out. So my sister lives in like the DC area. So her surgeon was Black, and I loved her surgeon. Like I thought her surgeon was super cool. But I didn't know what went into a cesarean. Like I didn't understand that they literally was picking stuff up.
You guys, all of it.
It's like taking it out. So
I do remember that part of the parenting class, but then that's when I stopped listening.
I didn't get it. So when I stood up and I seen it, and the doctor was like, "See, that's why I told your ass to sit down." Or whatever. But it was crazy because she had been under the knife for a really long time. At this time, my nephew was already out, but they had to sew her up, and she was starting to feel, it tug. And the anesthesiologist came in, and it was so crazy that they were actually so open and candid in the thing, because they were like, "Oh, we need to give her some more." And then the anesthesiologist was like, "Okay, well, let me check her insurance before I give her more, more medicine, so she will not feel the sewing." And then when they checked it, she was like, "Oh, she's good. Pump her up." And I'm like, so if she wasn't good, she's gonna feel the cesarean?
Keep going, because you're on the right track.
I'm like, so are you telling me that made the difference? And whether she was gonna have probably an experience that will probably torture her for the rest of her life?
Absolutely.
I'm like, wow, it's crazy. So I just want to tell women, and I'm guilty of this too, because I'm quick to let some insurance go, whether that is car insurance, life insurance, health insurance. I'm like, oh, I'll get it back. I was like, I'll let it lapse and come back. But no, it is definitely needed, because it helps. A lot of times, it is about rights. It is about being an advocate, but at the end of the day, they're a business. So if you have the money that they can charge you with, sometimes they treat you like a, like a queen. When we go to the car dealership and they pull your number and it doesn't come back as a 420. Now they want to give you water and ask you if you're hungry. You
want some chippy ice and some peach yogurt?
All right. They're trying to give you all types of other things. So I do want to express the importance of having insurance, even if you gotta. And I know it's just not possible for everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it sometimes. One thing, insurance is expensive as heck.
Right.
It's expensive as heck. And even if you do have insurance through the government or through the state, it's bare minimum. It doesn't cover things like imagine if you didn't have insurance.
Right.
Your cardiologist would not be covered.
Right.
What would you be able to do?
Yeah, I get the raw numbers on my bills that I get. I mean, it would have been upward of probably $500,000 between just that 3-week span. I mean, who, how, what, like?
And I mean, you
what does that even mean?
You both work, but unless you still got some old Pittsburgh money in the bank,
I mean, I can't hardly afford to pay the regular bills I got covered in now. So how am I going to pay you $500,000?
Yeah.
But also too, you're talking about the insurance. If you're somebody who is shopping like on the marketplace, right, for the insurance, and you're planning in your future plans is to start a family, look at what that maternity care looks like then. Like,
definitely.
Insurance isn't just, oh, great, that's another myth that we have, but those are one of those things we don't teach you in school, right?
Absolutely.
You find out, oh, cool, I got a job, I got insurance, and then something happens,
and you're not covered,
and your butt is on the line for $100,000. I mean, you don't know these things. But again, it comes with taking the time to make sure that you are educated about those things, those parts of your life. Check the marketplace, look and see, okay, I want to have a kid, over the next year or 2 years, whatever. Look and see what options are there for you as far as maternity care and post-maternity care and all those kinds. I mean, it's a lot. You know, I'm fortunate I have a job that I don't have to do those things.
Yeah.
But I can't even imagine, you know, I've worked in other school systems where I didn't have insurance the way that it did and had some other issues. I had to get my appendix out when I worked at a school in North Carolina and was on the line for like $20,000 because of the lapse, like how my insurance was covered. I'm like, I'm 3 years out of college. What makes you think I went to Wheeling Jesuit University? What makes you think I got $20,000 for appendix? I'm like, just put it back in. We'll be fine. We'll just deal.
Right there. I'm like, can I speak to your financial aid office? So
Right.
I can let them know about my financial hardship. So I won't have it. And it's crazy because not only have the insurance for when you're having a baby or you having these procedures, but also make sure you have insurance to cover your mental state. Because after you experience all of this, one thing that stuck out to me, like you said, you were having the nightmares, and I mean, you still got your hormones that you're gonna have to deal with. You're still dealing with your postpartum, and you're still dealing with the fact of being a new mother, and you don't know what's going on top of having almost life-ending everything. You know, just happens to you. So to be able to talk to somebody about that, to clear those thoughts, to understand what's going to happen. I mean, it's going to be important across the board. We do not take care of ourselves as much, you know, women, especially Black women. And it goes back to what you said originally. We're caretakers. And I actually seen a quote the other day. It was like, is your love language actually caretaking, or have you just been conditioned to service? And I love that, because I'm like, do I even like doing it? Like, do I like actually doing
a whole word?
Tell them about a cis fact. Do I like doing this? Or am I just so conditioned to doing this?
Do you feel resentful when you're taking care of everybody else and can't get your stuff done?
There you go.
So, this cis fact might be for you.
This is not that's not your love language. Caretaking is not, and it doesn't have to be. But I think we just get so caught up in what we're supposed to be as mothers, as women, as everything, that the first thing needs to be is you. Because if you're not together whole, you're no good to your husband, you're no good to your daughter, you're not even no good to the dog. So it's just like, you know, you have to be
And I'll tell you what, postpartum depression and anxiety sneaks up on you real quick.
I don't even want to know. I'm batshit crazy without the stuff. So I'm like, gosh.
Well, what's crazy though is, you know, typically when people think of if you've not been around someone with mental health issues and really know what the forms depression and anxiety can take on, then you're not really aware. If you're going off the TV version of what depression looks like, you know, you think somebody's just laying in bed crying all day. And that wasn't my experience at all. I was having, like, I wouldn't say that I had postpartum depression, but I definitely was suffering from postpartum anxiety. And I was so overwhelmed with everything, like every task to me was exhausting. And you know when you're tired and you know when you're exhausted and you just feel like emotional just because your body is just so I mean, every single task that I needed to do in a day felt like it was the absolute end of the world to me. If I needed to let the dog outside and I had to go from one room to the other, I was like, I would lash out. I was angry. I was hostile. And it wasn't until I did start speaking to someone that I kind of realized this was just how my postpartum anxiety was taking on its form. It wasn't me sitting in a corner crying or anything like that. And those aren't normal feelings for people to go through. You need to be with someone and talk. And your partner is great to talk to, but most of the time your partner is the brunt of all of that. And so they become resentful because they truly don't understand the changes that are happening. And it's hard for them to be in a neutral place of understanding, like, psychologically, physically what's happening. And so that was something that was really important for me to do, to beyond processing what I had been through, but then just understanding, like, psychologically and physically what was happening hormonally in my body.
And that's why I love this generation. Like, I love us. Like, I love this age group we're in. It's like low 30 something, where we are just like no nonsense about
Yeah.
self-care. Because
Yeah.
even if we take it from African American women of all races, but I think more so, African American, we are kind of taught to brunt through it, like to
Yes.
kind of thrive in that chaos
For sure.
or that pain, most to the point where you're almost celebrated for the pain that you kind of endured. Like, oh
Yeah. Yeah.
my gosh, you went through that. You're so strong.
Yeah.
Instead of saying like you did not, you should not have had to go through that at all.
Right.
It's almost like you're congratulated for going through hell and back. Like you
For
seen
being a martyr. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy that it's just what's expected of us. Like you have to, we're strong, we'll get back up, we get through everything until we don't get through it. And then, what happened? She was so strong. What happened? I didn't expect her to have a mental breakdown. Or, I didn't expect her to up and leave her husband and kids and, things like that. But that is, I think the generations before us where the women felt like at this point, I have no hope. Like I absolutely have no hope. I don't know what to do. Therapy was still a stigma. Like you had crazy out your mind. Like you said, what we see on TV, you had to be crazy out your mind to go to therapy. Medication was a stigma where if you took this, like, oh no, I don't need this. Where in actuality, you might need something to balance out your mood levels because you're not normal.
Right.
This is not how you should be. And that's what I love about this generation. Like we are old enough to be informed and make these decisions, but we are still young enough to cuss you out and get with you if we need to. Like if we gotta get at you for acting the fool.
100%.
We definitely.
But still old enough to refer to the Gen Z as those kids.
Oh, they get on my nerves.
The kids.
These kids.
These kids.
And I already know you see it all. So.
Oh, you don't even want to know. That's for the next time.
I can't even imagine. I think, and I felt so old the other day. I was at the store, and I was seriously looking at this little girl, and I was like, "Nah, who let her out the house?" And I was like, "Oh,
no.
Like,
reel it back. Reel it back.
I was like, let that girl wear what she want to wear,
Right. Yeah, because I can remember probably thinking the same thing about you a couple times at the Rat down at Wheeling Jesuit.
Whatever. But I appreciate you being so open and candid about, the situation. A lot of times it's hard for a lot of people to talk about and relive, and then actually because it's still an ongoing situation. Like this is you are battling daily and that you are actively seeking treatment for.
So I guess I never really talked about like the end of the story.
Yeah, you didn't.
I told you about all the drama. So at this point, I'm still, it's an everyday kind of process. Some days I have really, really good days, and then some days I absolutely can't move my body, and that's just kind of the reality that I'm in. But I'm a mom and of a toddler who does not stop moving ever, so I just don't really have those options. But I'll pretty much be on medication for the rest of my life. There are some studies that, if you can reach that recovery rate of 55 to 60% and you can maintain that for a year, then there's kind of talk about weaning off of medications. What doctors really like to see is that number come way up really quick, kind of like once you start the meds, a lot of women recover really quickly. That just really hasn't been my journey. My most recent scans were, I guess, in April, right around like the jump off of COVID and all that. And so I'm up to about 43%. So praise be for some higher numbers, but obviously it's not where we want it to be. And so just continuing to work through it and take my meds, and I don't know, we'll just keep praying and keep crossing our fingers for positive outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, that's all you can do. And I know if anybody else won't do it, you will ask every question.
Yes, absolutely.
Every question in the book, you will be thoroughly informed of
So
all
informed.
things.
My
So,
cardiologist laughs because he knows every visit, like I have a front and back sheet of notes that I check off, and he already knows to expect it. So
yeah, we definitely have to get serious about, just our health. We want to be here. We want to be here so we can keep protesting all the other things.
yeah, man.
The social injustices, the lack of, everything.
Yeah,
And
there's too many Karens trying to take over on social media. We've got to be here to even the playing field.
we have to be here.
If not for anything else.
And that alone is draining, physically and emotionally. So you have to be healthy too.
I know.
You have to be healthy to continue to, have that energy.
I usually take a double dose of meds if I know I'm going to be on a long Facebook binge for the night. It depends on how petty I'm feeling, though. If I'm feeling like a good argument, then double dose it.
You're not too bad. You're always very respectful.
Yeah.
You make sure you let them know. You make sure you always keep your job. So that's
that's the key right there. Could this be screenshot and sent to my boss, and would I be fired for it? Maybe yes, no. If it's a yes, gotta revise, gotta edit. Here's why I'm really good at that, though. I've spent 10 years having to respond to angry parents in emails.
There you go.
And so you get really good at understanding how to talk people down, first of all.
Absolutely.
And to prove your point that they can't really refute. So I've had a lot of experience doing that, and that's really helped me in this COVID era, Black Lives Matter era for social media responses.
I would say you are darn good, because I have read through a couple of them, and I'd be like, I tell people, just go to sleep. I'm like,
I usually try to throw like 2 to 3 MLA citations in there, like a web link to a news article.
I do not want to be your student, because one, I'm gonna slack off. You're gonna want citations, and I don't want to do all this work that you are requiring of me. So no, I'm not about to do this. You want too much. You want background information. Where do I get this information from? Very, very informative. So I guess before we end this thing, and guys, Lacey is gonna be back. She's actually like a twofer. I think she's the first time we have had the same person back to back, where we're going to be discussing her forte. And I think she just may be the whole host for the next one. I'm just going to
welcome to Say Something Sis with Lacey featuring Sharde.
Exactly, because I'm sure you have tons and tons and tons to talk about, but we're going to make sure you do not get fired. So I will be here to push the button every time. I'm like, let's
No, I will say everything I kind of am going to talk about has been something that I have already said multiple times in many meetings.
We're good.
So
there you go.
We're good.
We're good to go. So she is going to be back next week when we talk about another topic in education. But before we let her go, I always ask my guests to pull together some type of sentiment and wraparound message that you want to give people. So since this is about women and their health and things like that, if you could give them that one golden line or 2 or 3, what would it be?
Ooh, okay. All right, here we go, ready to start preparing email. Yeah.
Think about it.
I guess I would just say, we pretty much talk about maternal health today. So I would say that obviously babies are so important, but babies need mothers.
They do.
And, in order for us to be here for our kids, for our family, we have to speak up. And it's not just on our shoulders either. You have family and support people also, hopefully, that are there to be able to speak up and advocate for you, ask questions. I would much rather be labeled as aggressive than to be in a casket somewhere. Had I not spoken up for myself, I wouldn't be here for me and my family. So please speak up for yourself, advocate for yourself, ask questions, do your research, go to your appointments prepared, know what your outcomes are going to be so that you can be here to keep listening to Say Something Sis.
Right there. No, was the end, and I actually stopped recording, but now